I think you know, I'm Steve, Principal of the College, and I'm delighted to have as a guest this morning Nick Coleman, who is a very established journalist, music critic, would you say as well? Critic, author of novels, been writing and working in the sort of music industry, met loads and loads of famous people. I've been reading some of his stuff. I read most recently your bit about interviewing John Lee Hooker.
Yes.
Yes.
I did.
And how he fell asleep halfway through the interview. I'm sort of thinking that I hope this one goes a bit better than that. So what we're going to do is when we contacted Nick, and the other reason bringing Nick in is that he's an ex-Long Road student.
Yeah.
So from way back in the day, when Long Road was just becoming a sixth form college, and you know, one of the things he said, if he was going to come up and talk, he wanted to have a look around and a bit of a reminisce, and has already been completely freaked out by the fact that this is no longer a large parquet floored hall with a stage that he used to have to go and sit and hold the head teacher's Bible for hymn book for assemblies, and so wait till he sees K Block and some of the other areas around college. So what we decided to do, rather than Nick come in and do a talk, was to just do it a bit more conversationally, make it a little bit more relaxed, and hopefully you'll be able to sort of have some questions in there as well. So I've got a few questions that I'll probably ignore and just start chatting. And we're going to start off though with Nick reading a little bit from his sort of, is it autobiographical?
First one, Train in the Night.
Train in the Night, is it sort of autobiographical, really, isn't it? It's sort of autobiographical.
It's a memoir.
Memoir. We're looking back at. So
it is about looking back, and the passage I'm going to read. Can you hear me? Okay. The passage I'm going to read, and there are going to be two chunks, and I leave it to Steve to decide when the second chunk should be. Is about Cambridge, and this will be Cambridge in the 1970s, and it will touch on music as we go. The book is mostly about music, and this is the other thing you need to know. I'm deaf as a post. This era doesn't work at all. This one works slightly. I'm profoundly, severely deaf on that side. So when we talk later, and we've got questions at the end of the session. Could you translate or convey? Yeah. Okay. All right. Cambridge in the 1960s and 1970s admitted the modern world grudgingly. It's less grudging in the 21st century, but I suspect that this is partly because what serious damage can be done to it by modernity, if damage is what it is, has already been done. The city is a living, breathing, choking experiment in radical traffic management. And I should drop in here that this was written 15, 16 years ago, so things may have changed. New housing estates have spread like metastasizing cancers outward into the fen. The ring of satellite villages, which for centuries were divided from the city by open fields, is being drawn into the main body as the green belt is sold off for development. My old village is no longer separate. It's become a suburb. The psychiatric hospital has been subsumed, the majority of its buildings now forming the hub of a vast business park and housing estate conjoining village and city. The hospital's strange central tower, which once stood as proud of the surrounding fields as a grain silo on an American prairie, is now just one perpendicular among many. New roads snake all around. These are the margins of Cambridge life, the frayed edges. It's probable that the edges are no more nor less frayed in the 21st century than they were 40 years ago, when strays from the hospital would occasionally attempt to batter our back door down in a haze of terror and alienation. looking for home, no doubt. I'm certainly willing to bet that the essential character of central Cambridge life, the life lived at the heart of the city where the fabric is strong and as stain-resistant as it ever was, has not changed at all. Cambridge really does have much to preserve after all. As well as lovely buildings and ancient streets, it has an ethos, a way of life, a purpose, a purview, a tradition which serves to neuter the effects of passing time. Cambridge has only got rid of the bits which are not profitable. You have to go back a bit to witness the start of it. For instance, the half-timbered medieval warren, which gave excitingly onto the semi-popular shopping street next to Boots, called Petty Curie, was pulled down in the early 70s and replaced by a multi-storey car park and shopping mall. Incidentally, they've also gone, so you have to factor that into what comes next. It is as ugly and contaminating now as it was in 1971. Nevertheless, that car park, in all its brutalist novelty, even though it's gone, serves as the setting for a jointly held but independently experienced memory of almost immeasurable import to me and to one of my friends. We weren't friends at the time. We didn't even know of each other's existence. Nevertheless, I vividly recall, as does Rob, being on the upper floors of the car park at Christmas 1972. Me sliding into the family car in a pubescent funk after being taken to the pantomime at the Arts Theatre. At the same time and in the same place, Rob was up there hanging around with David Joyce, for reasons that escape him now. The higher levels of the car park gave a direct view over cold concrete bastions straight down through the windows onto the stage of the Corn Exchange over the road. Both Rob and I have transfixing memories of the muffled roar that billowed through the glass and out into the night air over Corn Exchange Street, and of the partially visible, in fact headless, shape of a spotlit checked shirt. Quite difficult to say when you've got a dry mouth. Excuse me. Of a spotlit checked shirt and electric guitar bobbing on the stage 40 feet below. I can hear the boom now, edgeless as fog, but as exciting as a storm. I can still see Rory Gallagher's Stratocaster and shirt, and so can Rob, who has enshrined the memory in the same way that I have. That would have been 4 or 5 years before he and I actually met. For each of us, it was our very first encounter with live rock and roll. There is nowhere else in the country quite like Cambridge, but then no other city in the country is owned in the same way. Cambridge is owned by the yoked yet private interests of the institutions which, combined, give the city its irreducible identity. Cambridge only exists because of the university. It has no proper industry of its own, and no, I don't really count the high-tech bricolage which goes on in the name of science in Silicon Fen, and I don't count the brickworks, lovely as Cambridge bricks are. The city is where it is, hiding in its low-lying spot behind a barely there chalk escarpment. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Only because a huffy bunch of fugitive clerics in the 13th century settled there, miles from civilization, detached from the vulgar realities of high feudalism, in the avowed hope that their pursuit of knowledge might not be disturbed by, well, you know, all that crap. The city was conceived as a bolt hole. And as the colleges grew up over the medieval period and acquired royal accreditation to go with the money and influence which found their way to this obscure fen outpost, what was conceived as a bolt hole developed into a city, with all that that word implies in the way of people, property, crime, transport, services, trade, and all the other manifest unsightlinesses of urbanised society. In the face of all that, it was only to be expected that the colleges would evolve their own discrete micro-society with its own anthropology, its own hierarchies, and its own way of managing money. They also owned the land, nearly all of it. And the great thing about holding all the cards, by which I mean the land, is that you can influence to a profound degree who and what goes where and on what terms, especially the unsightlies. Meanwhile, the centre of the city can be reserved for the beautiful buildings which house our beautiful thoughts. And it is. Cambridge is a beautiful place. I can't help but love it, and part of me yearns to return there, even though I left it 40 years ago, vowing never to go back. But I also shudder when I remember the social organisation of the place, in particular the strange relationship that exists between town and gown. The ugliest part of my socialisation, the bit I know is weird and disproportionate and somehow not real, not in the way most people think of reality, but which nevertheless corresponds with the sort of artificial bilateralism that Protestants and Catholics grow up with in other less privileged but equally divided environments. I am riddled with prejudice in this respect. I love Cambridge, but I find it hard to like. My parents were university employees, not members. Is it okay for time?
Yeah, you're fine.
My father graduated from Clare with an MA in law, but he emerged from that experience firstly determined never to practice law, and secondly not to spend a minute longer in his university town that was strictly necessary. Somehow, though, only a decade or so after taking his leave, he found himself back there with a middle management job at the university press. He'd had enough of his London commute. He evidently felt that the medieval bolt hole he'd bolted from soon after graduation might make a good environment to bring up a family. And in lots of ways, he was right. In due course, to thicken things up a little, my mother became assistant librarian at Magdalen, with an additional gig upstairs looking after the private library of Samuel Pepys. My parents were outsiders, endowed with a selection of insider privileges, and I don't think they were ever very easy about it. Not my dad, anyway. My mum loved her job, loved the peculiarity of the college world and its irascible denizens, inexplicable rights, extraordinary buildings, unfathomable laws. She loved having somewhere awkward to organise. Nevertheless, I was brought up in an atmosphere of wariness and circumspection regarding what goes on in the world behind the high walls and studded timber gates of the colleges. The issue was not morality, but snobbery. It was not turpitude that made Coleman blood boil, but the hierarchical attitudes which serve to support such deeply rooted, charismatically traditional institutions, the same as the ones you find in royal households the world over, in the church, the legal profession, the military, government, even in the medical world. To my Quakerish pa, we're nearly there really wasn't that much difference between the clerical elitism which so affronted his spiritual sensibilities and the vertical social organisation of the academic world. It was as if one completed an ugly echo of the other. You could sometimes see the unease in his face. Sometimes, later on, when he was an older man with a couple of stress-related heart attacks to reflect upon, there was nothing at all to be seen in his face. This was his equivalent of the 1,000-yard stare. "Hello," we children would say, perkily over supper, waving the palms of our hands in front of his face. "Hello, anybody in?" And then he'd close his eyes, open them again, and smile slowly. Very occasionally, we didn't even get the smile. Let's stop there.
Thank you. I'm going to give a little bit of round of applause now. It's a great read, that book. It's a really good read. And I know Liz is reading it as well. Have you finished it, Lizzie?
I've got 5 pages left, and I'm afraid that I just couldn't make it through the end last night.
She said she's got 5 pages left of the book to read.
Oh, you've got a treat in store.
But I thoroughly entertained the coffee shop last week when I burst out laughing at the holiday orchestra section.
The Holiday Orchestra.
It was my highlight.
Were you in Holiday Orchestra?
I was in holiday orchestra.
Was anyone else in Holiday Orchestra? Yay! What did you play?
Yes, so Harriet's assistant principal, she was also in, and is also an ex-Long Road, so she was...
I've completely forgotten about holidays.
So, does it still exist?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it did, yeah.
Well, maybe that'll be, if you know where that bit is in the book, you might be able to find... Is it a long section? Okay, we'll...
The next bit I've got is a lot shorter.
Okay.
So sorry, I mistimed that.
But it's a great read. It's great reminiscing about Cambridge. There's some sections about the college in there, everything else. I came to Cambridge, I think probably a little bit after, maybe even after you left. I came here in 1984.
Yeah, 6 years.
And you'd already sort of been through that bit. And as students will know, I came here because I messed my A-levels up and because I was doing too much guitar playing and everything else. And I went into clearing because I didn't make my university offer. And I had a few offers from different colleges, and I did what any sensible, well-matured person would do. I looked in the gig pages of the NME to see which town had the most gigs on and thought, that's where I'll go to university. When I got here, they'd closed the Corn Exchange down for refurbishment, and I saw very, very little because there was hardly anything going on. Yeah. But you were here in the heyday of 70s Pink Floyd Cambridge,
yes,
presumably.
Absolutely.
What was it like being in that music environment and growing up in that here?
Well, that's a very big question to try and answer pithily. It did feel like Pink Floyd Cambridge. They weren't my favourite band, but I had an enormous allegiance to them because they expressed the environment in which we all lived. I've written something long and tedious about that in another book. Pink Floyd Cambridge, and you have to remember that I left in 78 when I was 18. So Pink Floyd Cambridge for me existed essentially from when I saw Pink Floyd live at Pompeii on my own with 2 other local hippies in the Arts Theatre in 1973, I think, or 4, through to 1978. And it was all interrupted, of course, by the chaos that was punk. And I was a very superficial and trendy young chap, and I ditched Pink Floyd and anything I'd ever liked before without conscience in 1976 and became a Cambridge punk. And Cambridge punks were very special.
It's true. It's true.
Soft.
They used to hang around on King's Parade, sort of for the tourists.
That was later.
That was
those
later.
were the fake punks.
Okay.
We at least were contemporaneous, but we were soft, really soft. We got kicked around on Midsummer Common by the local hard boys.
By the skinheads?
There were skinheads. Mostly they were just chaps who were coming out to look for the middle classes on parade.
It was quite tribal in those days, wasn't it? In the book you described some of the, if you liked this band, you weren't allowed to like that band, and if you were in this group, you weren't allowed to like this.
That's right. And in fact, the next bit I'm going to read is all about that specific confrontationalist world that we lived in. Because when you say Pink Floyd Cambridge, you immediately think of Grantchester Meadows and Willows and First Love and all that kind of thing. Essentially, you were basically on the run the whole time from the local skins or the local soul boys or whatever group it happened to be. And yes, they had musical allegiances, but I think the main allegiance was to the group identity.
Yeah.
And hippies, which or freaks as we were called in the early 70s, were essentially despised for mostly being middle, not entirely, mostly being middle class, and being sort of appearing to lack discipline of any kind whatsoever. So if you were a tough nut in a Crombie, you saw a freak, you thought, easy meat, then you went in. It was scary.
Yeah, I remember being a fake punk and having my never trust a hippie badge on. So how did you move from being a music fan and being into that to getting into writing about it? How did you make that transition?
With a lot of freaky luck and a lot of generosity by somebody who's here, and a lot of sort of sticking my head down and doing it, because I did my degree in Manchester, which was great. I loved Manchester, but what I really, really wanted was to be in the centre of things, where things appeared to me to be really happening. And by an enormous stroke of luck, my girlfriend at the time, her uncle owned a record shop in Ladbroke Grove called Honest John's, and he gave me a job. In those days, this is quite an important thing to meditate upon. In those days, there wasn't quite so much pressure at the end of your studies at school and university to get a proper job. You could pretty much do what you wanted so long as you kept yourself, and that's the big thing. It was much, much, much easier in the 1980s to keep yourself. So I was paying, 28 quid rent a week in a flat, which is extraordinary when you think about it. That's just over 100 quid a month to live. You could live off bins. My lovely wife, Jane, sitting over there, she did the same thing on the other side of town. It was really quite exciting because you could take yourself, put yourself in a location where you wanted to be, in my case, Ladbroke Grove, in Jane's case, South East London, and get into it, get stuck in, befriend the Clash or whatever it was that you found yourself able to do. So I did that, and I worked in the record shop for a couple of years very happily, and while I was doing that, I pondered my future, as you're supposed to do. And I thought, really, given that I was okay at writing and I loved music and I had an opinion about every single thing going, I thought I ought to make the most of that. And as it happened, there was a very nice man who used to come into the shop to buy and sell records called Angus, who was one of my favourite writers at NME at the time, and I became friends with him. And he's sitting over there. And he gave me confidence, actually, just by talking to me about what it was like. I used to ask him questions about what it was like doing stuff for the NME. I think he'd moved on by then. But it was a kind of psychological entree. And I did a lot of stuff that I could find. I scraped the first paid piece I ever did was for the back of a record sleeve, liner notes as they were called, and gradually got a little bit of momentum up, and then with an enormous act of will propelled myself into the Carnaby Street offices of the New Musical Express, wearing red trousers and a beret, and got away with it. Fortunately, the editor was a sort of part-time jazzer. So he gave me something to do. I did it okay. And that's how it began.
So was that the sort of, because the NME was huge at that time, wasn't it? And it was the sort of music. I mean, I remember, I would wait for the NME to come out and rush out and buy it. And I did have a letter published in the NME at one time, which was a big thing for me. Was that the whole sort of Julie Birchall period and the sort of rebel that was just after that?
Just after. This is the really interesting thing. Yes, by the time I arrived, there were a few straggly remnants from the golden days. Nick Kent, a surprisingly nice chap, really nice chap. Charles Shaw Murray, they were sort of hovering around the edges but were moving away. The Julie Burchill, punky cadre had gone, and there were a bunch of hard-working chaps, and I think one woman, who were basically clearing up the mess that had been left by the first half of the 1980s. I'd got my first piece in there in 1985, and most of the stuff I did was in 1986. And it was the first period of the enemy's decline. It was not what I had hoped. I'd hoped that I'd be sitting at a desk with my feet up, perhaps twanging guitar with Ian MacDonald and Angus MacKinnon and all these people. But they'd all gone by then, and the whole music scene had moved on from what I really liked, which was mostly stuff from the 70s and before. So it was quite a hard lesson about how time plays a huge role in determining the validity of what you're doing and the value of what you're doing. You've got to time it right. And I was disappointed from the word go, I'm afraid.
Do you feel like you were just always slightly behind the curve, just behind the curve on what was coming up new? So, but during your time as a music writer, you must have met and interviewed, and you've already a couple of weeks ago I was reading that your interview with John Lee Hooker, even for me just to be in the same hemisphere as John Lee Hooker would be incredible. So, what memories have you got of know? Who should we know about? Who stands out for you of people that you interviewed or came across?
Well, I'll start with the ones that I didn't get to do, which is Marvin Gaye, Tom Waits. That's almost it of the people I wanted to do. Oh, God, I mean, one of the big problems talking to you lot is that, of course, the things that I liked in 1970s is 50 years old. And shall I try this? Who's heard of the Rolling Stones? Yay! Okay. The Rolling Stones were past their best. They were treading water at best, but they were available for interview. So I did all of them twice, and that was great. My taste tended towards the Black American R&B side of things. So I got to interview Al Green 3 times, possibly 3.5 if you count a phone interview where he was just horrible to me. Who else, Jane? Oh, God, there's millions. Johnny Hooker. What?
You can't have Al Green and Bros in the same conversation, surely.
I did do Bros. It's one of my attempts when I was at Time Out magazine to try and be pop. Nick Goes Pop. And I went down to be with them while they recorded their second album in the south of France. And as far as I could tell, all they did was leap around the landscape on quad bikes. And then when I attempted to do an interview with them, they dressed me up and took photographs of me.
So I bet none of the students remember Bros.
Does anyone remember Bros?
No one knows Bros.
Oh, this man is cool.
Is it really? Right. Look them up. You won't thank me later.
No, that's not going to help. I didn't do Bruce Springsteen either. So they were the 3 big ones that I didn't do. Marvin, Tom Waits and Bruce Springsteen. Or Michael Jackson. But I did all the others.
James, Björk?
Björk. Does anyone know who Björk is? Great. Björk was the best interview I ever did because of her. There was a reason for it. She had recently been in the newspapers because she'd thumped an intrusive journalist at an airport. And if you've never seen the footage, it's worth it. It's great. She comes through the the arrival doors. Somebody rushes up to her with a microphone. She goes, poof, and down she goes. And Björk was trying to mend her, shall we say, her public image, I suppose. And I really, really liked Björk's first album, and I really, really wanted to interview her. In fact, Jane had worked with her a bit, and she turned up in what I can only describe as a kind of medieval princess dress with puffed sleeves down to there, and then and hair all done up in a sort of extraordinary thing. I'm not very good at hair for reasons that are probably obvious. And we had the best conversation I think I've ever had with a microphone, for the simple reason that there was a tacit agreement. We didn't decide this, that this was going to be an artificial exchange in which we talked about the things we had to talk to as if for a third person. So it's a little performance. And this was around the time I got the real yips with interviewing. Went through a whole year, I think, in the early 90s, where I simply couldn't do interviews because it was so artificial. And there were people hovering from the record company who'd turn you out if you didn't ask the right question, etc., etc. But I found out in due course that if you both accept that this is an artificial construct and it's not a real conversation, and I'm not really going to find out about what's going on behind your mysterious eyes, and it's a kind of performance, that you actually get more. And I think one of Angus's mates, who he interviewed and I never did, was David Bowie. Now, he was brilliant at doing precisely this thing, recognising the artificiality of the situation and kind of generating a performance out of the interview, whilst also, because he was a nice chap, being a nice guy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, David Bowie always used to famously talk about having masks that he'd put on, didn't he? I'll put this on for this particular situation.
That's right. And he would. I was talking to someone yesterday, another old music journalist, we're all old, about this very thing. And he said that David Bowie said to him, asked him his opinion about whatever the latest thing was. Tim, my friend, told him what he thought, and David Bowie wrote it down. Said, thanks, I'll keep that for later.
Always preparing. Yeah. Okay, so that was really the tail end of the heyday of music journalism. And I mean, that was almost tribal. I remember having arguments with people about whether you bought the NME or Sounds, or, you were still reading smash hits, which, just marked you down as a little teeny bopper.
But it was good, smash hits.
It was, yes, but you couldn't admit that. Yeah. It was only for people that wanted posters on their walls. How do you see music journalism? Is there any music journalism left? What form does it take now?
I knew that the question would come. It doesn't really take any form in the sense of form at all. There are a few places where you can write about music and get paid for it, but I wouldn't recommend that anyone set their caps on being a music journalist now, because there is almost nowhere to get paid for it. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of places where you can write about music really beautifully if you want, and they're on that thing we call the internet, and there's Substack and Jane, what are the other ones? Yeah, Instagram. Yeah, you can write perfectly good music journalism on Instagram if you want. And it's all yours. No one can challenge you. Well, they can challenge you. That's the best bit. They can't hurt you. It is not a paying profession anymore. And the chap at the Daily Telegraph is as old as I am and hanging on in there. But arts pages in newspapers are disappearing, hand over fist. The whole idea of cultural criticism by the culture that we live in has changed its location from the economically viable space of the newspapers and the specialist magazines and the inkies, as we call them, NME, Sounds and Melody Maker. None of that exists anymore in concrete form, something you can hold. It is only online that they even make the tiniest little mark, those things. And it's up to you. If you want to write about music, I still write about music online, partly because I can't hear it anymore because I'm so deaf. So writing about music is very, very important to me because it's a way of generating music in my head. But it's a great place. If you want to write about music, you make your blog or you go and find somewhere else on the net to sound off, and you can do it, but you won't get any money for it.
So you moved into the world of novels, slightly into more creative writing. Is that
Eventually, I had a long career at newspaper.
You had a long career in the with Time Out and
then the Independent.
And then the Independent
newspaper. And yes.
And then you thought you'd go more from critic to creative?
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't think of it like that. I mean, I just thought, God, I'm now 48. I've got a story, a bit of a story to tell. I better turn it into a book before I run out of time. And so I did, and that did quite well, this one. And then I wrote another one. No, I didn't. I wrote a novel. It's the first bit of fiction I ever wrote. And it's okay, it got quite good reviews, but it did not sell a copy. And we won't go into the ins and outs of why that happened, but to my great disappointment, I'm not going to tell you the numbers because I'd probably faint, actually, if I thought you knew. It didn't sell a copy. And then I wrote a third one called Voices, which I think is my best book, which is all about singing. Singing as a way of coming to know yourself, which is an appropriate juncture, I think, to insert the fact that after I'd been a newspaper journalist for 12 years and then a freelance writer for another 10 and bringing up children, house husband, I thought I'd better do something with my life, and I turned myself into a psychotherapist, and that has informed my writing massively in the last 10 years. And I'm very glad it makes me so happy doing it, so it's good.
Well, I mean, your novel Pillowman. I have got a copy. I have to say, it did take a bit of tracking down.
Yeah, I bet.
I got it from eBay, but it's good. It's good.
Thank you.
It's in that sort of Nick Hornby-ish sort of. No.
You mustn't say that.
Okay. Because.
He's an old friend of mine.
Okay, so
he's much better than me, and he's a lot richer than me.
He's done very well. And he was actually a Parkside English teacher, wasn't he? At one point.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
One of my friends was taught by him.
What's more annoying is I gave him some work at Time Out to help him through the period help him through the period while he was writing his first book, Fever Pitch. So I part financed this brilliant book called Fever Pitch, which is about football, and watched him zoom into the literary empyrean, leaving me left way behind. And in fact, thereby hangs another mini tale. I thought, if Nick can do one, I can definitely do one. So I took a sabbatical from Time Out. I thought, I'll get the back of it broken in 3 months, 3-month sabbatical. Sat down, wrote every day, and I was writing on a thing called, what were those computers called? Amstrad. Does anyone remember what an Amstrad is? You know everything. Amstrad computers were sort of beige.
Alan Sugar, wasn't it?
And the words were in green, and you had the facility on an Amstrad to write something and then press a button and everything goes. Mm. So I wrote for 3 months, 3 chapters, thought, I've better revise this, check it out. Got up the day before I was due to go back to work, read the whole thing. It must have been probably somewhere in the region of 200 pages. Read the whole thing through and thought, this is a pile of crap. Pressed the magic button and it went.
In those days, it was irretrievable.
It wasn't
irretrievable. Saved on the cloud. That was if you deleted it from the machine, it was gone.
It was gone, yeah, forever. Oh. That was hard. It was a hard one to take. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I recommend. Nick Hornby. I don't know. Have people heard of Nick Hornby? He was probably his fever pitch was about his recollections of being an Arsenal fan in particular, which you're also an Arsenal fan, and is brilliant. It was made into a film, and also you might have seen the film High Fidelity as well, which with Jack Black, which is mentioned in the very excellent Long Road, Long Lens magazine that's just come out as one of my favourite films, absolute killer soundtrack. And if you haven't got anything else to do this weekend, you can go and watch High Fidelity. I think it's on Netflix or somewhere.
It's a good film.
Okay, I think that's an approach. Do you want to read your other bit, and then we'll take some questions from the audience?
Fine. How are we on Anglo-Saxon?
Anglo-Saxon.
There's an Anglo-Saxon word in this.
Oh, I get you.
Would you like me to?
No, that's fine. We're
brace yourselves.
Okay.
Back in my day, the children of the city's elite seethed around its buildings and over its lawns and bridges like floodwater. I expect they still do. Their confidence as fluid and undammable as ever. I expect they all still attend holiday orchestra in the school holidays too, and fuck each other senseless in their tousled beds while their parents read Flaubert on the other side of the partition wall. Whether the nuances of juvenile society are still the same is moot, though. I'm not particularly inclined to do the necessary research, for fear in part of disappointment that it hasn't changed at all, and in part that it has. But I bet they do snooty in exactly the same way in Cambridge. Cambridge snooty is special, and it travels extremely well both through time and space. That's because it's armour-plated by its own certainties. These guys have certificates to prove that they're better than you. In Cambridge, an individual's worth may always be calibrated by college, by title, by qualification, by publications, by staircase, by seat at table, by position on shin of bicycle clip. Maybe not the last one. What can always be said about Cambridge society is that it is not materialistic, not in the usual sense of the word anyway. Wealth is less important than academic achievement. Beauty ranks lower than brains, and conspicuous materialistic display is the one thing you do not do, ever, under any circumstances. Old shoes, old trousers, outdated skirt suits, leather-capped elbows, bicycle clips. That's the deal. Personal elegance is deployed neither as a signifier of economic standing nor as a means of self-projection, but only as a disguise. You don your best clobber in the same spirit that a headsman puts on his hood. Similarly, your house is a sprawling tip, your car a run-down French wagon de la gare, and you do not go on expensive foreign beach holidays. Which is not to say that Cambridge money is hidden. On the contrary, it is everywhere to be seen. It just manifests differently. It has different priorities. Mostly, it is concerned to maintain what is already there in a state of quiet, even sublime stasis, which is one of the reasons why Cambridge was always, in my day, a terrifically violent town. I was once stopped, as a bit of modernly unacceptable language coming up as well. You'll have to take it on trust that this was commonly used in the 1970s. I was once stopped on my bike on Midsummer Common by a large youth of about my age who wanted a light. I matched him and smiled nicely, at which his eyebrows came down like twin guillotines. "Are you a puff?" he asked. "You what?" I replied, genuinely surprised. I thought we were heading in the direction of firm friendship. "Are you a puff?" he snarled again, growing into his dismay. "Or are you a punk?" I had to admit he had me there. It was 1977 and I was wearing a leather jacket twinned with a scarlet and pink mohair jumper over torn drainpipe jeans. My outfit yodeled ambiguity, hint of puffiness, shade of part-time punk. I made sure that the bike pedal was in launch position before replying, "Do you know, I'm really not sure today. You choose." And away I flew like Hermes, borne aloft on winged rally. He nearly caught me, bruised the small of my back, but I didn't fall off, and in that moment I felt wholly wedded to the gown and not the town. And the gown was not my people. It was in that moment that I first hated Cambridge. Cambridge divides because division is a property of its nature. On the far side of Midsummer Common from Jesus College lie a couple of the estates where the less privileged of the city live their domestic lives away from the beautiful central area they're there to service and maintain. Back in the 70s, the Common was a highwayman's paradise, the bloody no man's land which literally divided Gilded Centre from grotty suburb. And if you were caught in the middle of it after nightfall with the wrong credentials and no backup, then you were fair game. Everyone I knew had a story to tell, the best of them belonging to my friend Thompson, who'd fallen into the hands of a marauding pack of highwaymen at dusk, submitted to the ritual kicking, and then been pleasantly surprised when, mid-hoof, his principal assailant had suddenly called off the assault and helped Thompson to his feet. To what do I do or owe the honour? Thompson probably didn't say. His assailant pointed out that he'd just realised that the two of them had been at infant school together, and given that fact, it wouldn't be right to completely rearrange Thompson's internal organs, so they'd leave it at that. And it was on Midsummer Common, 2 or 3 years later, that the Specials. Has anyone heard the Specials? Good man. And it was on Midsummer Common, 2 or 3 years later, that the Specials played a concert to a marquee full of local neo-mods and a large body of the group's regular travelling support. The marquee simply wasn't big enough to get everyone in. A detachment of local skins contrived entry by slitting open the side of the tent, and the violence which ensued resulted in a couple of Specials being charged with incitement to riot and the event making national news. It was one ruck too many. Too much fighting on the dance floor, indeed. That's a great line from a later Specials song. Of the several new things that Canterburyans learnt to their dismay or pride from the post-riot media huffery was the statistic that Cambridge now stood as the third-ranked most violent city in the UK, measured on a per capita basis, of course. But that didn't stop Holiday Orchestra.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you. I think it's, I don't know whether students would recognise that sort of feeling. I mean, Cambridge was quite violent.
It really was.
I believe the first ever jailed football hooligans were Cambridge United fans.
Is that right?
For when they ambushed, they had an operation to lead Millwall fans. They met them at the station disguised and led them into a cul-de-sac and beat them up.
Blood ensued.
Yeah, and it's. I don't think it's violent like that now.
No.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
Okay, that brilliant stuff. I think we're going to open it up to some audience questions. Hopefully we've got, and again, might want to ask about your time at Long Road or any aspects of your career that you've had as well. We've got any questions?
I knew it.
So when it came to transitioning to creative writing as opposed to journalism, what changed in your creative kind of way of kind of developing ideas onto the format of a sheet from journalism to creative writing?
Okay.
Can I ask Steve
Yeah.
for clarification?
Yeah, so sort of saying in that transition from being a critic and a journalistic type writer to a creative writer, how did you have to, what sort of almost like mental changes did you have to make to get the words onto the page?
That's a very nice question, and I will try not to be boring in the answer, because it would be very easy. Without giving a sort of rundown of my unconscious processes in 2000 and whenever it was, not a huge amount happened, actually. I think when you write, and you spend a long time writing, you feel it has its own contours and shapes and its own topography. The writing over a period of time, and you just begin to feel, or in my case, I began to feel that I wanted to do something with a bit more heft, and I had been running on empty for quite a long time at this stage, not producing anything very good. So that's what I did. I mean, interestingly, other people do it a completely different way. The celebrated Nick Hornby we were talking about just now, I knew him in Cambridge long before he became a writer or anything like that. He was a graduate of Jesus College, I think, and I was a townie working in Andy's Records, and we just became friends in the pub. And he, at the age of, what was he then, 22, I was 19. At the age of 22, he was saying stuff like, yeah, I want to be as good a writer as John Updike. And you won't hear anyone saying that nowadays, because you can't. Yes, you can aspire to that kind of thing, but it's going to be jolly hard to be able to finance the life that will allow that. But he was very different. He wanted to be a creative writer from the word go, and he was very, very good at it. I mean, he used to show me his short stories, and they were great. Very American in style, but very good. And funnily enough, he did it the other way around. He came to a little bit of music journalism, and I gave him the work about 10 years later. But it all depends on where you are in your mind, in your body, in the environment. It's entirely variable, and you just have to listen to yourself. And, take it on the chin when you do things like I did in 1993 when I took my sabbatical and wrote this pile of crap, which had to be destroyed immediately. And you have to deal with that as well, and that's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, you said about the Pillow Man before, you said you had this idea. How long, had that been a sort of book that you'd had festering somewhere for years and years, or did you think, I want to write a book, what shall I write it about?
No, it was a short story that got out of hand. And it was actually from a conversation, wasn't it, Jay, with Lucy. We have a friend called Lucy, very nice lady, and she went into John Lewis department store, bedding department, to buy a mattress. No, it was a mattress topper, whatever it was, something to do with beds. Oh, it was a pillow, of course it was. And she told this beautifully sort of cadenced little story about the fact that they have a pillow man in John Lewis in Oxford Street who specialises in pillows. That's all he knows, and he has a particular sort of way of being. And she told me the story of her buying a pillow from this guy, and it was such a beautiful little nuggety thing. I thought, that's got to be my first brilliant Beckettian short story. So I wrote what I thought was going to be a brilliant Beckettian short story, and it wasn't really. It felt more like the first chapter of a novel, because it's just the story of a woman going into a department store to buy a pillow and encountering this strange creature from somewhere else that she's not used to. And about 2 years later, I did the last full stop and thought,
Okay, other questions? Harriet?
I've got a question. I still publish a bit of art criticism, for which
Oh,
you
great.
get paid a pittance, but there is, you couldn't make a living from it.
Yeah.
But over my career, I guess one of the things I've learned as a writer is from working with really good editors, brutal editors.
Say that again.
Working with good editors,
Yes.
sometimes quite brutal.
Yeah.
And my question was for young people trying to write now, if you're writing for the internet, you're self-publishing, what advice could you give around improving your craft or your discipline in the absence of having that person telling you to take it out of the passive voice?
That is a really good question. And have a friend like Angus there, who's a brilliant editor, and show it to him and see what he says. I would say develop a second head, your editing head, which is detachable. And when you're writing, you don't want anything to do with him. But when you come to writing, screw him on, shut down your own brain, and use him or her to edit the piece for you, ruthlessly as you can. And the old cliche, kill your babies and things like that. Do all of that. I absolutely, even though editors can be more hurtful than any other creature on God's earth, I still defend the importance of editing absolutely to the hilt. It is essential to get another pair of eyes on everything you write before you get it on. And if you've got a girlfriend or a boyfriend or an aunt or uncle, a family member, or anyone who you respect and you think would be prepared to take on the very onerous job, and it is onerous, of taking seriously something you've written, shove it under their nose and say, would you read that and tell me what's good about it and what's bad about it? Hopefully they'll say some good things. But if they say some things like, that's rubbish, don't believe in that, and you can't write like that, take it seriously, because they're right, almost certainly. Always respect the editor.
Can I just add, hopefully the English coursework writing people are really making notes on this, because this is what you're doing for your summer work, isn't it? Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question? And again, linked to coursework, Emma, of course. What's your view on the modern editor, ChatGTP, Grammarly, AI, which students will be more likely to put work into and say, write this better for me?
This is a question, Steve, which I was dreading, because I think I ought to have a position on this. I mean, you mean just AI in general, yeah, applied to literary matters. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying, but you can see that it's not going to go away. And I've sort of maintained a sort of hands-off, noli me tangere sort of relationship with it since it appeared. But Jane said the other day, make it do something pretending to be you. So I thought, oh, yeah, okay. So I put into ChatGPT, write a review of Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti in the style of the British music writer Nick Coleman. And it took 2 seconds to do it. 2 seconds to write a 400 to 500 word review of this rock album that I'm quite fond of from the 70s. And it sounded like me. I think it sounded like me probably 20 or 30 years ago. It was really, really freaky. I haven't quite settled with it, actually, Steve. I can't decide whether I'm frightened by it or whether I'm just going to rise above it. It was me writing really badly. The English wasn't that great, but it felt like the way I think. The way particularly when I wrote very densely and a lot for Time Out in the late 80s and early 90s. And it felt really as if they somehow got hold of the whole Time Out back catalogue and found a way to replicate my style badly, but horribly accurately as well.
So, yeah, I mean, so you probably saw Nick Cave's comments on when people had put in write song lyrics in the style of Nick Cave, and he went absolutely apoplectic in saying, computers don't suffer like I do. Yeah.
I mean, it is, of course, totally Orwell-esque. Orwellian, sorry. And our learned reaction to things which are Orwellian is to be appalled and to be frightened and to retreat into our safe space because we don't want the world to be Orwellian. But the reason we have the expression Orwellian is because Orwell was in many ways right. And I think the way to deal with it is not to shrink into your inner self, but to fight the bastard and, face up to it, face it down. And when it comes to, there's an awful problem with education, which I can't comment on at all because I don't know anything about it, but it is a very, very, very serious question that you need someone with more brains and more authority than me to give a good answer on.
Yeah. Are there any more questions? Yeah.
Well, with music being such a big part of your life, as it should be.
So can you do it?
Yeah, I can say Nick.
With music being such a big part of your life, as it should be, how have you had to change the way that you experience music after having difficulty being area?
That's a very good and a very touching question. I haven't sorted it out yet. It is really hard. There is one thing that is slightly redemptive, which is that I can hear the damage is in all the middle range and the upper range of the frequency range, and the damage is mostly in the middle and upper frequencies. So I can hear drums, and they sound like drums. And I can hear bass, and it sounds like bass, but it's not tuned. So I can put on a Jamaican dub record. Fortunately, I love Jamaican dub. I can put a Jamaican dub record on, and the drummer's doing his on the 3, and that sounds great. And then the bass player starts, and he goes all over the shop, and you have no sense of key centre at all. And in every other kind of music, there's stuff on top of that, which we call harmony and melody and stuff like that. And it is absolutely chaotic. So it is hugely offensive to my sensibilities to hear any music apart from Jamaican dub reggae in a way that I have to deal with. And I am dealing with it, but it's not easy. It's extremely painful. And I've had some therapy, which was kind of helpful. But I have to mourn it whilst living it as a new way of being. And I mean, thank you for asking the question. It's the biggest question in my life at the moment, and I'm doing all right, but it is putting me to it with the old existential hard stuff, I'm afraid. But I'm okay. I mean, I'm a cheery chap, so it's not so bad.
You've said in some of your writing you can still hear songs that you're very familiar with in your head.
Yeah.
And
Sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah. What I meant really was that if I write about music, then the music that I write about has to be in my head. I mean, anyone who's written about music knows that you can't hear a piece of music and then go away and have the sound of crickets in your head and write about it. You have to have the music in your head to write about it properly and well, I believe. So it's kind of fake because I'm remembering it. And this is something, I've written another book, which probably won't get published because I don't think it's quite good enough, which is partly one of the themes is what is the relationship between music and memory, since it's all in memory for me. And the end of the book, I arrive at the conclusion that, yes, memory can furnish you with a sort of counterfeit sensation of music, but it's not the same thing. And the music that we hear in memory is essentially an idea of music. It's not music itself. And I do experience, and this is something I should have mentioned, a thing called musical... they're hallucinations, which are incredibly hi-fi and realistic, and they respond to what's going on around me. And I've had Tom Waits singing just for me in my head, as if on the most expensive hi-fi you've ever heard. Absolutely fantastic. And that is different. But I can't control that. And also Tom Waits has clocked off and it's reduced itself to a stockpile of bits of not very interesting music. But that music sounds in my head, whereas the music that you remember is an idea that your brain has constructed of what music is, which is completely different. And it doesn't affect me there where it should. Whereas old Tom Waits in his hallucination really did affect me. It was very real. It's extraordinary.
Not sure how I'd feel about Tom Waits invading my headspace like that. But
you wouldn't like that?
Yeah, I think I'd feel uncomfortable with that, yeah.
Yeah, he fills a lot of space.
I can imagine. Okay, any more? I think we've had our sort of hour. And if we've got any more questions that would want to come from the students?
Oh, I can see one.
Yep.
Do you have a least favourite music genre?
Oh, least favourite. We could do some quick fire questions. Least favourite genre of music?
Have to be quick fire and reply. Heavy metal.
Heavy metal. Okay. And favourite?
I don't have a favourite, but my taste, I'm kind of 18th century, my taste, my lord, is for American-derived R&B.
Excellent. And Emma?
Have you seen Hamilton?
The stage play, the musical. Have you seen the stage play Hamilton?
No, I can't do the theatre anymore. And especially not that, because I hear it's really loud.
You can watch it on the telly on Disney.
Oh, right, you can do that. It'll still sound absolutely horrible. I mean, I've tried every way to make music sound good. Even incidental music sounds vile. So if I'm watching a TV drama which is larded with music, turn the sound off completely and have subtitles.
On your book Voices, who would be the voice for you? If you just like, okay, I've got one voice I can listen to, one singing voice that I can listen to.
Expresses me.
Yeah.
What a saucy question. It would be a fight between Al Green and Marvin Gaye. Is that all right?
Yeah.
It's allowed.
Great voices. Great voices. Okay, I'd like to thank Nick ever so much for coming
Thank
up
you for coming,
from London today, and talking to you and sharing what it was like back in Cambridge and his career as a music journalist and as a writer. And we didn't get on to Arsenal, which is a bit of a shame. We talk about Arsenal later on.
Anyone
Maybe.
want to stay behind and talk about Arsenal?
But we could do that, and I'm going to give a little show around the college. There might be some students that want to have a chat afterwards. I'm assuming that if some students want to talk to you...
Well, if they do, I'd be honoured.
Yeah, it'd be fine. But can we put our hands together for Nick Coleman, everyone?